team. And Deanna, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello, everybody. My name is Deanna Ceja. I'm also with the Riverside County Office of Education, Educational Services, part of the math team with Karen and two other of our buddies. We want to welcome you. We're so glad that you're here. I want to just be upfront and say that this is the first time that I've been on Big Marker. And so Karen and I are a little nervous because clearly we've run into some snags already, but I think we're getting ready to go. If somebody can just let me know in the chat that you can actually see the slides, that would be great. Thank you, Jolene.
You.
Thanks. Awesome. Okay, so we'll get started.
Yes. So if you are on Twitter, we're big fans of Twitter. Our Twitter handles are at the beginning of that. So follow us, and we often tweet things that are going on at the county. And we're going to start with a notice and wonder. And I would like you guys to just take a look at this image and think about, what do you notice and what do you wonder about that image? And in the chat, if you will go ahead and write what you are thinking, but do not hit enter yet. Don't share those thoughts. We're going to give everyone some time to think, write it out, and then I will let you know when you guys can actually push enter to share. All right, I know some of you might still be thinking and typing out those thoughts. So at this time, we've called this a community return, where we give everybody a chance to think about what's been asked, write it down, and then we ask everyone to hit enter at the same time. So at this time, if you would please hit enter so we can see what you were thinking. I wonder what the area of the shape is. I noticed they're all different colors. Lots of triangles. More triangles and other shapes. I noticed it looks like tangrams. My favorite color, purple, perfect. I wonder what other shapes I can make with these pieces. Yes, these can be a lot of fun to play with, right? So we are going to be looking at notice and wonder throughout, and various ways we can use this routine. And with this, it's nice to be able to share out the thinking that others have, and it's all valuable thinking because it's just your own noticings and wonderings. So thank you so much for sharing some of the things that you were just noticing and wondering. We are going to do a real quick poll just to kind of get an idea of who's in the room. Now we have a couple more people who have joined us. So again, this is our first time launching a poll here. So I'm going to start the poll. And I believe you guys should see that now. So we just want to kind of know who is in the room with us. You can select more than one answer. So if you're a classroom teacher and you're secondary and you're math, you can click both of those. If you're, and you have kids, then you're also a parent. I know I would click a couple of different things in here. So please click all that apply to you.
Can you hear me, Karen?
Yes, I can.
Can you nod your head or shake your head? Okay, I can't hear anything.
Oh. Do you want to test your mic? All right, I'm going to go ahead and give you guys just about 3 more seconds here. We have 29 responses and 36 people. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close that poll. We have a nice variety in the room. Thank you guys all for being here.
I don't hear anything.
Deanna's trying to test her mic real quick. She's lost her sound.
Karen, I'm going to step out and come back in. I'm going to stop sharing. Why don't you take over?
You got it.
Okay.
So as we shared, this is a new platform for us. So thank you guys for your patience as we are, and it won't let me screen share. Well, that's fun. So Deanna has no sound and I have no screen share option. Let's see if I can pull up the handout maybe. Let's see if it'll let me share it from there. And it does not.
I'm back.
All right, I'm going to try one more time. I don't know if you can hear me now, Deanna.
I can.
Awesome, because it will not allow me to share my screen. I did try to pull up the handout and it still didn't work. So if you want to share your screen again, and that's exactly where we are. We just, we didn't get anywhere else because I was as well.
Perfect. So, so this slide is talking about how math is a gatekeeper. I think for us today, this technology is a gatekeeper too. But here's what we knew in 2013. We knew that STEM jobs were expected to grow by 21.4%. And we knew that kids were there was going to be a job explosion. We knew that in 2013, and math instruction, what we teach and how we teach mathematics hasn't changed. And so at this moment in time, mathematics is still a gatekeeper instead of a gateway. And so how can we begin to change that for our kids? So we want to share with you, we invite you to, at your own leisure time, to take some time and look at this position paper written in conjunction by the National Council of Supervisors of Math and the National Council of Teachers of Math. And it's a position paper that they've written about STEM education. And they talk about the importance of having disciplinary and interdisciplinary STEM, that the disciplines of science and mathematics are key and important, and they can't be bypassed for just interdisciplinary access to mathematics and science. So that a good STEM education program includes time and resources spent on mathematics. That includes professional development, that includes curriculum that's actually aligned with the standards. So there has to be a very explicit investment in order to move your STEM program forward. Because again, math is still a gatekeeper. So in the blueprint, I'm going to assume that a lot of you have read the Innovate Blueprint from California. But if you haven't, again, that picture is a link. You can click on it and it'll take you to the actual document. But it defines math literacy as students who know how to analyze and reason. They know how to communicate ideas effectively. They can pose mathematical questions. They can model, they can formulate, solve, and interpret questions and solutions in terms of science, technology, and engineering. So just take a moment and stop and think about the experiences that kids are having in your class and the possible experiences that kids are having in other classes of math. And are students learning to analyze, to reason, to communicate, to pose questions, to solve, to formulate, to interpret? Are they getting a whole comprehensive experience? So one of the things that it's important to start with is an understanding of what mathematics is. So here's two different perspectives, two definitions of mathematics posed slightly different. And I want you to take a moment to kind of read through them. And again, we're going to do another community return. So I'd like for you to take some time to just think about what you wonder and what you notice about these two definitions. You can start typing it in the chat, but don't send yet. And this is where I like to say that it's important to give students enough think time when you're asking kids to do mathematical thinking. And it takes a long time for kids to think and process. So go ahead, if you're ready, go ahead and send. Let's see what everybody's thinking. What did you notice and what did you wonder? So one seems more interesting than the other, one's easier to process. Both of these definitions are viable definitions of and would describe mathematics that is relevant in the 21st century. But I want you to notice how neither of them is spending too much time on solving equations. Exactly. Right. The second one talks a little bit about computation, but only for the purpose of formulating the mathematics in the real world. So there's a change in mathematics. And again, as you think about the experiences that you've had and the experiences that are being provided by yourself with students or other people to students, or what you've observed as you walk around, is this the mathematics that students are experiencing?
All right. So thinking about what Deanna just said about the mathematics that our students are experiencing versus our likely experiences, you can see in this first image, it says less of this. And it is just those calculations, very procedural work. And if you can't remember the steps to solve, or if they didn't make sense, or if you didn't have connections to them, math is becoming challenging. Students start shutting off to it because it doesn't make sense, because they haven't had any sense making with mathematics. And then we want to think about the things on that opposite side of that. What do we want to see more of? And it is all of the math around us. We still hear people say, I am not a math person, or I wasn't a math person. We know there's no math gene. But there is this mentality that we catch. That is when we hear people say, and it's normalized to say that I'm not a math person or I wasn't good at math either when we're talking with our kids. There's so much math we do all of the time. It's just not what we think of as our school mathematic experiences. It was very procedural. If I didn't remember things, I got stuck and I couldn't make sense of it. But real world math makes sense. And we want to see more of that and more of the connections to all of the math that exists in the real world when we're shopping, when we're playing with games, when our kids are building and playing with just their toys at home. So more of those connections and high quality tasks that have entry for all of our students, and hopefully more than one solution pathway so that our students can develop and continue to make connections and make a solid understanding of their math experiences. So we have, what are the implications of each of these statements when mathematics instruction is planned? And I want you to just take, I'm gonna give you guys like 2 minutes. I want you to read these. I want you to go ahead and write your thinking down. But again, don't hit enter. We wanna honor everyone's opportunity to think, write, and then we'll share. Since we don't have chat rooms, we find that this is our easiest way to be able to honor as much of the thinking that is in the room with us. So again, just read these statements, write down what your thinking is, and then we'll let you know when you can hit enter. All right, as you guys are finishing typing up those thoughts, and if you're not quite finished yet, please feel free to continue and you can hit enter when you are finished. But if you have already finished, go ahead and hit enter for us. The green one is student-led. The first one doesn't give the students an understanding. The second one is more of a way of thinking. Hands-on activities to solve real-world problems. The questions help us make sure the problems we use are actually valid and meaningful. It's definitely a way of thinking about what we're doing in class and what the goal is of what we're doing in class, and that we want our students to be making connections to the mathematics, not just getting answers. So thank you guys so much for sharing that. I would like to talk to you guys for just a second about the TRUE framework. It is Teaching for Robust Understanding. You may be familiar with this. The TRUE framework is it's 5 domains that are research-based. And on that first slide that was just up, there are links to each of those domains. And on this slide, you can see a brief summary about each of those domains. And the content is just making sure that we're giving students a chance to be knowledgeable, flexible thinkers with what we are doing, along those lines of making sure what we are doing is meeting the goals of what we want for our students in their content area, whether it's science, it's math, it's technology, whatever it is that we're doing, that that content is helping our students become flexible, knowledgeable thinkers. Cognitive demand is just that, making sure that our students have opportunities to grapple with ideas and that we're not over scaffolding or providing things that are too challenging, and then our kids are getting frustrated and turned off by their content area. Equitable access to content is, active engagement for all students. Every student's voice is able to be heard in the conversations and the work that is being done. Agency, authority, and identity is it's about the ideas that build our students' own identities and agencies in their content area. I talked a little bit before about when we start getting those ideas of I'm not a math person, providing opportunities for students' voice to be heard and their work to be seen in any content area really helps them start to develop their own identity as doers of mathematics. And that's what this domain is about. And formative assessment, using the work that we are doing to inform instruction and not for not everything being done for a grade or something that has to be in the grade book. We need to inform our instruction so we can meet students where they're at and deepen their understanding where they are, so they make connections so that they can develop their own agency in the work that we are doing. So to do that, we want to talk about math classrooms and what the spaces should be like for our students. And I'm going to let you guys, you'll have this, but there's just a couple of things I want to highlight from here and not read it all. But it's really about the inquiry relationships that students will develop in their mathematics classrooms and being able to be curious and confident as doers of mathematics. Being able to have their voices heard and how did they solve a problem, right or wrong, where were they, and making connections with those thinkings. And then low floor, high ceiling tasks, entryway for all students to have access to the work that's being done and then elevated from where their access point is. That growth mindset, again, going along with the TRUE framework too, we're developing students who need to see themselves as doers in any content area, specifically thinking in mathematics and in science and in all of our STEM fields. We want to open up that gateway. And then the next slide is from Joe Bowler, who will be our keynote this afternoon. There's a link here to her YouTube site. And I am going to give you a minute to read this. And what I would like you to do is just write down what from here resonated with you and go ahead and you can just send that in the chat. All right, I'm seeing a couple of things come through, that problems can be solved in different ways. Mistakes are valuable. And I saw another comment up there that making a safe space for students to make mistakes and make connections between their thinking and others' thinking when they make those mistakes. And that overall mistakes are valuable. Love it. All right. And then Deanna, you're up.
Yeah, so we're going to share a video by Annie Fetter, who in the math community has created an opportunity to really grow this idea of notice and wonder. So we're going to listen to her for a little bit just before we go into the routine.
And
So I'm going to tell three stories of things that have happened to me in classrooms that I think illustrate stuff that we either need to care about more or our students need to know that we care about it. All right. So the first one, I went to a school in Colorado to do a workshop with the teachers after school, and I said, hey, can I teach your geometry classes during the day? Because you have Sketchpad. So we went to the lab, and we all constructed, we were doing centers of triangles, so we all constructed centroids. So, you know, if everyone constructs a centroid, they're not that interesting, really, because they all kind of look the same. They're all sort of in the center. So then we get to the circumcenter. Everyone constructs circumcenters, and now they're talking about whose is wrong because they're different, right? Yours is wrong. You didn't follow directions. I did too. Yours is wrong. So I thought, well, this would be a great chance to get them to talk about how do circumcenters work? Why do they work the way they do? So I wrote some questions on the board. When is the circumcenter inside, outside, on the triangle? And these kids are like, well, those are dumb questions. It's so obvious. I'm like, it's not really. And this one kid is sitting there, and he's sitting there, and he's just staring off into space. And I'm like, huh, okay. So I go over and I go, what's up? And he's like, let me get this right. You actually like math. I said, yeah, I do. And he just was like, so I just left him. I said, I'm just going to leave him there for a minute. And I thought about it. I thought, he has a great teacher. He's in a good school. He's had good teachers all along. They care about him. They care about how he does it. He had never met someone who he thought actually liked math. Right? So this is really important. We want kids to be passionate about something and to see that we are passionate about it. So the first thing that we should care about more is math. Just math for math's sake. It's cool, right? Okay? All right, so I'm glad we all agree on that one. So in the second one, I'm working with some fourth graders who need to do a little bit better on the PSSA, the Pennsylvania State Test. And so I have them for 45 minutes a week. All right. Now, this one kid, we were doing some test questions. See, his paper is blank, right? So he hadn't been there the previous week. And so he thinks, oh, man, I got to copy off my neighbor, right? Because I'm supposed to have the answers, because that's what we're all about, answers, right? And I'm like, I don't really care about that. And so next thing you know, this girl, Naani. Now, Naani had been a pain in my butt the whole time. Okay, let me tell you. She jumps up and she says to him, stop copying. Miss Annie doesn't care if you have the right answers. She cares that you know why they're the right answers. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe that just happened. Like, she has not been paying any attention at all, and she totally gets it. She gets what I care about. 3 sessions, 45 minutes, and she's like, answers don't matter. The whys matter. So, and I was like, this is great. I can convince kids of this. You can convince the kids of this. So this is the second thing on our list. We need kids to know that we care about the whys. All right? That's very important. Let's go. All right? Are we all for it? Okay. All right. So this brings us to my third story. Okay, so I went into this first grade classroom and I taught a model lesson. I didn't know the teacher. I'd worked in the school a lot. 45 minutes straight out of the everyday math book to show them that it can be done in not a really crappy way. And 2 weeks later, I set foot over the threshold and these kids run up to me, these little first graders, Miss, Miss. And I'm like, what? And they're like, ask us what 70 plus 40 is. And I'm like, okay, so what's 70 plus 40? And these kids, like, they're about to pee their pants, okay? They're so excited. They're like, it's 110. I'm like, how did you know that so fast? They're like, well, see, there's the 70 and there's 40, and they both have a 0, and you just take the zeros off, and the 7 and the 4, that's 11. Everybody knows that. And then you put the 0 back on, and it's 110. They were just dying to tell me what was in their head, because when I was in their classroom for 45 minutes, I asked what was in their heads the whole time, and they figured that out. One time, they were like, this woman wants to know what I got in here, right? So that leads us to the third thing that is on our list of things that we really should care about more. All right, we need to care about students' thinking and their ideas. And we need them to know that we do, because that has to be the lifeblood of our classroom, right? We talk about making math relevant to kids because we're going to do it about basketball and shopping. The most relevant possible way we could do math is make it related to what is already in their heads, right? And that can be about the math because we love math. It can be whatever, but it's relevant to them because it's about their thinking, not about some artificial, fake, real world thing that we came up with. So you're all going to take a pledge with me. Are you ready? Okay. I, Annie, do solemnly swear on a Mary Dulciani textbook that I will make more obvious to my students my love of math, care and ask about the whys more often, and elicit and value more of my students' thinking and ideas. So help me, Euclid.
All right, Deanna, I think you can share slides again.
I think I am. There we go. Okay, so I think just to reiterate, because we're getting ready to go into the notice and wonder routine, is this idea that we need to care more about mathematics, the whys, and student thinking. And the reason why is, again, because we're trying to change from a gatekeeper to a gateway. And so in order to do that, students' beliefs about themselves need to begin to change so that we can get more productive interactions from the kids. So the notice and wonder is a short routine that can be used to elicit students' reasoning, to encourage curiosity, to get students to think actively. It's really about students looking at an image, a representation, an equation, a question, and then really just to ask about the noticings and wonderings, what they're observing, and any questions that they might have, and to kind of bring that out, to slow down a little bit and think about the mathematics and how the mathematics works, and to start making conjectures. And so when you give students an opportunity to engage in notice and wonders, it begins to create a safe community for learning. Because again, when kids believe that the teacher or the adults care about their thinking, they'll begin to share. And we'll realize that the students actually learn a lot. And if you were in Doug Fisher's presentation yesterday, one of the things he told us to do was we need to stop teaching kids what they already know. We don't know what they already know if we don't ask them to share their thinking. So in math, as you know, we have the content standards and we have the standards for mathematical practice. And when students are engaged in a notice and wonder routine, they're going to be engaging very, very specifically in some of these standards for mathematical practice, particularly SMP 1 to persevere in problem solving, to make sense, and SMP 3 to construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others. And then depending on the task, they're going to be looking at how they're reasoning abstractly or quantitatively. They're going to be looking and making use of structure, or they're going to be noticing patterns and use some of that repeated reasoning. So it gives an opportunity to engage kids in a lot of mathematics.
So we're going to start with this little mini lesson and ask you, what do you notice and what do you wonder about the images you're seeing now? And you can go ahead and just drop those in as you are writing them out. That's fine. Incubation period for the bugs on the leaf, nature, every image has the color green. Where is the light pole? Crazy ivy. One looks like a person. Beautiful plants. Notice a lot of greenery. Wondering how they're all different. Giant shapes, leaves covering the light, nature, illusions. So lots of noticing and wonderings with this image here. So this lesson is, what is kutsa? And I am going to drop a link in the chat right now. And when you open that, it will take you to a lesson. Because of time, we're not going to go through all of this. If this was the only lesson I was doing with students this day, this would kind of be the flow of that lesson, and letting students get into this and explore, and starting with that noticing and wondering image to build that curiosity for students to make connections to what they already knew about the leaves, the shapes, the wondering about how it might be growing, And so when you click on that, you can see that there is a nice lesson that's done that lets the students familiarize themselves either through videos or reading. It does have features with words that are highlighted so that students can check on them and get definitions. And then giving students time to explore this, again, through the videos or the readings, and then bringing everyone back whole class and getting to talk about what did they learn while they were reading that, and bringing it back to those noticing and wonderings, what they learned, what they found interesting, what they're still curious about. And this could be done with the example here is students get to drag a little sticky note over, write down their thinking, and then the whole class is starting to develop and drop their thinking into these slides. As we go on with this, we can then build a representation, a diagram of the rate of growth of the kutza plant. And we know that it grows 12 inches per day, which is why you can see some of these images where that light pole looks like a person. It grows really fast if it's not taken care of quickly. So Deanna is going to go through some samples of what that work may look like, since we didn't have the time to create that work here.
So these are 2 student samples. And so I selected those from some work that was presented because there was other samples. Some people drew graphs, some people drew number lines and showed like an increase in growth. There was lots of different ones, but I have a goal in mind. We're going to talk about variant and invariant variables. So I wanted them to kind of look at these 2 representations that students submitted. And the question to ask is always, what do you notice and what do you wonder? So the first notice and wonder we did was to spark with prior knowledge and get them curious so that they can start to learn a little bit about the kutza plant. And now we're going to mathematize that information. So here's a mathematical model of that. But this notice and wonder is to look very specifically at the math, some patterns, some things that they might notice, some things that they might wonder about. So I'd like for you to take a moment in the chat and for you to share what you notice, only what you notice. So yes, we're looking at 2 different versions. We've got different ways of getting answers. Noticing some detail, different steps. They arrived at the same place, even though there's a difference. I did, right at the very beginning, somebody said somebody used addition and somebody used multiplication. And I think that's, for me, is really, really key for this, because I want to know, as my formative assessment, what my kids, how are they reasoning? Are my kids still doing additive reasoning, or have they made that leap to multiplicative reasoning? Because I know that I'm going to need to address that. They need the multiplicative reasoning in order to be able to look at some of these proportional reasonings in linear graphs and linear models. So I want to know right away, are the kids leaning more towards an additive process or a multiplicative process? For sure. But also I want to value that there's different ways of doing something. So once we do that and the kids kind of notice things that they'll notice, I think most of the time the kids notice some added and some subtracted, but they still got the same thing. We're going to talk about varying and invariant changes. Because we're working towards generalizing a pattern. right? So I want them to be able to notice what numbers are staying the same and which numbers are changing, because that's going to help us be able to kind of generalize some ideas. So that notice and wonder becomes really, really important for us to use as schema that the kids can then attach to in order to understand what variant and invariant means. I could have given them the definitions from the beginning. I'm not sure that would have taken us anywhere. But now they have things because we've had a conversation about these two different ideas, and they can begin to formulate an understanding. So here is the protocol. Those underlined words are links that will take you to other resources. But the first thing is to display the problem and read the question aloud, or ask students to volunteer to read the problem. Remind the students to take time to think independently. This is probably where we make the most error for students. We don't give them enough think time. And this is where I remind you that if you have English learners, that it takes English learners more time to process, because they have to read, they have to translate, they have to process it, they have to come up with a response, and then they have to translate it back to English. So it takes them a little bit longer. So we want to make sure that if we want kids to think, we need to give them the time to think. We want to ask the students, is there anything up here that you were wondering about? So first we asked about the notice. We jot down what they notice. Then we ask them about what they wonder, and we jot down what they wonder about. We want to make sure that all the students got a chance to participate. And then we begin to ask questions. And so we want to make sure that we give kids the opportunity to speak more about their own responses, or to ask the questions. If you're in an asynchronous model, you would do the same thing. You probably I would recommend that you make a video of the process so that kids know what to do and what to expect. So sometimes when we do the notice and wonder protocol, we find out that the kids don't participate as well as we had hoped to. And so sometimes there might be some things that we do a little bit differently that will help communicate to the kids that we really do care about their thinking. So we need to communicate that we value their thinking, and so we might stop rephrasing and repeating everything that students say. If something needs to get repeated or rephrased, we want to ask another student to revoice it or rephrase it. We want to make sure that we are not asking questions during the noticing process or during the wondering, that the questions that we ask come from the students, and it happens at the end once everything has been shared. Okay. Avoid praising. So be very neutral about the comments that students are saying, because if you happen to forget to praise one student, that will affect that student's engagement in the notice and wonder routine. But you do want to thank them and acknowledge them for their contributions. So these minor changes in the way that you formulate and you run and facilitate a notice and wonder will begin to communicate to the students that you care about their thinking, because you're not going to take the stage away from them.
So we have included some sample visuals that Notice and Wonder can be used with. And they're data visuals, they're visuals from textbooks, they can be visuals with the sample student work like Deanna just did. They are stimuli to use with Notice and Wonder. So if you look at our next slide here, you can see we have two different graphs. And again, thinking about the routine and honoring the students' thinking and just making sure we're calling it out. There may be some thoughts sometimes where students may say something like, well, I noticed there's blue and orange on here. Absolutely. There is blue and orange, and we're going to lead them then to what they're representing. You can see on our next slide that we have a sample that on this one, it has a question. And so some of our notice and wonders can be done where we remove that question stem and just let them notice and wonder and be involved in what's happening in the representation. And then sometimes, depending on the goal of the work that we're doing, we may have the question stem available. The next one represents from UCubed. Joe Bowler has started, they're called data chats. And this is one of those examples from the data chat that she has that are already pre-done. I don't think we might. What's going on in this graph from the New York Times, if you've seen some of those where it's different representations with, and then doing what do you notice and what do you wonder. You can use your textbook, just simply using images from your textbook instead of giving them the problems to work out. What do you notice and what do you wonder about the graphs or the sample, the map? What do you notice and wonder about what we are doing within the adopted curriculum? We can do this with various representations of mathematics. We can do this with patterns we're trying to get students to recognize. We have perimeter. We have a couple of different graphs that go through just using the different representations of for perimeter and area and different tables, and asking our students what do they notice and wonder about these as well. We calling attention to student work with those. There's a bunch of different ways notice and wonder can be used within the context of the work that we're already doing. And Deanna, back to you.
So then we're trying to change how mathematics is viewed from a gatekeeper to a gateway. And so what Notice and Wonder does is it gives every student an opportunity to participate. It gives them an entry point, which again is important, because if they don't feel like they can contribute anything because everything is way out of their reach, we still want them to contribute, because I can build and I can help them build from wherever they are. Right? It gets everybody engaged because we set the standard that everybody needs to be able to participate. Everybody needs to provide an idea, something that they noticed, something that they wondered. And then it starts to give us a diverse perspective of how the kids are thinking, and the kids begin to learn about each other and their own, and they begin to decide about people's different strengths, and it begins to spark ways that they can begin to think. Things like, I've never thought of anything like that before. I really like that. I'm going to start to think like that. And then these tasks are open-ended. So if you find that you've got a task that is too close, then remove some information from the task and make it a little bit more open-endedness. That way students can get more involved and more engaged and be able to create some of the mathematics themselves. So the process of sense making begins when we create curious classrooms, full of thoughts and ideas. By asking what do you notice and what do you wonder, we give students opportunities to see problems in big picture ways and discover multiple strategies for tackling a problem. Self-confidence, reflective skills, and engagement soar, and the students discover that the goal is not to be over and done, but to realize the many different ways to approach a problem. So it allows students to slow down and think about the mathematics. That's extremely empowering. And that's one way that you can begin to build classroom community that is safe and is focused on learning and not answer getting.
So as we are coming to an end, we would like you guys to just take a minute and think about, an idea you have, maybe a way you can use this, the feeling you experienced while you were going through the Notice and Wonder routines with us today, and a step that you will take. And you guys, this is independent reflection for you. And then on the bottom here, we do have a feedback form. I'm going to drop that into the chat in just a moment so that you guys can give us some feedback about this. We are always looking for information back from everybody. We learn from our participants so much. And our next slide is, just a thank you and a way for you to contact us if you have any questions or need anything, and then we have some resources.
So we want to provide you, we did give you the handouts, a PDF, but if you want the actual slide decks, we went ahead and it's in the chat box if you want the slide deck. We do want to thank you for being patient with us. We did have some technical glitches, and I think that made us a little nervous. But we appreciate you sticking with us. We hope that you continue to use the Notice and Wonder. And we believe that if you do, it's going to really begin to do some differences for the way the kids believe in themselves, and beliefs determine actions. So thank you.
Thank you guys very much. I just dropped the feedback in as well. You also have the slides like Deanna said.
Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you guys. Hope you guys have a great day too.
So this was recording.
Yes, it still shows it is. I wonder if that was an auto setup they have for to give access after.
Uh-huh. We'll probably want to reach out to them and ask if they can share it, because we might be able to pull some things out of it.
Oh, yes. Love it.
So do you want to jump out and jump into a Zoom?
Yes.
All right.
Do you want to give me your...
That same link, the Zoom that with the 911 Zoom link that we created?
Oh, yes, it's on the master. Got it. I'll see you there.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.